Part 3 of One Drink Leads to Another. Tanya was short even for a woman. She wore a white halter top that showed her floral design tattoo on her back with a skull in the middle of the garden. She seemed to jiggle in all the right places when she moved and had a delightful feminine bounce that had the power to attract a certain type of man. She seemed a bit trashier than what Michael should have, but maybe she wasn't. Maybe this was exactly his type. "Who is this bitch?" Tanya yelled as the rain picked up. Her shoulder-length blonde hair floated like wispy tentacles, moving almost as if independent to the wind and more to her disposition. "It's not like that, baby," Michael tried to say, but he may as well had been shouting into a hurricane. "You've been fucking this bitch for months now, and you thought I was gonna stand for it?" she yelled violently. Michael stood up, but dropped down to his knees. Alder didn't take him as the begging type, but she picked up on the emotional desperation immediately. He wasn't begging for himself. He was begging for her sake. Alder began to get concerned. There was very little room to move on this little tower perch, and nothing but a 2-story drop to the roof proper. "Baby, please calm down," Michael tried to say over the rain, which was picking up to a feverish pitch. "The fuck are you talking about?" she yelled. When he reached for her, that's when the drama lit. Tanya exploded as if his gesture to calm her was the spark. The air seemed to thin and the rain began to physically bend around Tanya's body. There was a buildup of force around the little woman that collected as if drawing strength from her rage. The air made a huge concentrated gust, followed by a pulsating bass tone as it pushed from the subwoofer. The rain and wind blasted at Michael so hard he fell down and skidded far on loose gravel. Michael's arms flailed like hooks with nothing to grasp. One arm fell over the side, and if he hadn't shifted his weight at that instant, he would have no doubt fell to the waiting subroof. Alder reflexively stood up, but knew she shouldn't have. She could instantly sense that she shouldn't have brought attention to herself. "You knew he was taken, didn't you, bitch? What was my man's dick like, bitch?" She screamed almost incoherently. "Was this who you love more than me, huh?" yelled Tanya, staring Michael in the eye. Michael shook his head in lament, not in affirmation to her question. Tanya abruptly turned to Alder and yelled. Her blonde hair raised, then gusted wildly out as if an unseen wind shot from a cannon. Alder was hit full blast with such force she was thrown clear off the tower-like lip of the roof. Michael yelled and made a desperate dive to yank Alder from the waiting jaws of death, but he wasn't close enough or fast enough. Tanya's rage quickly turned to panic at the realization of what she just did. She froze in place until Michael pulled her from her moment of clarity. "What have you done?" was all he could manage to say. He looked at Tanya with tears in his eyes that seemed to cut through the steadily streaming canopy of rain, and that was all it took to reignite her rage and justify all the wrong she had done. "Are you crying for this bitch?" she said in a rage. "I loved you. I love you even now. I defended you despite what everyone said, but if you can't see you're out of control," Michael said, but he cut himself short when he felt an invisible wall of force inching him off the side. He tried to take a step forward, but was held immobile. He could find no traction as his foot shifted on loose gravel. "The fuck are you saying? Are you telling me you love me while your dick's still wet from that bitch?" said Tanya, having too much bile and hatred in her to hear a word spoken. Michael stopped resisting. He knew he was going over the side, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to avoid that inevitability. Tanya's rage didn't relent. She flung Michael over the side as easily as she would flick lint from her shoulders. Michael disappeared into the darkness of the rain. Alder felt herself free fall. She dug deep and found something inside her like discovering a new limb she never knew she had. She neared the ground and pushed out with a will that moved past her physical body. With a ball of force, she pushed the ground fractions of a second before impact. The force exploded in an invisible detonation. It stopped her forward momentum, but she was so close to the roof she got the wind knocked out of her. Alder touched the key around her neck for strength and struggled to sit up, though as soon as she got prone, she saw Michael crash onto the roof. His body made a splash in the rain, but crackled from bones broken. Alder cried. She crawled over to Michael weakly. Michael couldn't turn his head to look at Alder. His bones poked out of his body haphazardly. It was clear that even if he did live, he would never be the same. Before Alder could utter a word, she sensed something about to transpire like an animal sensing incoming danger. A dark spot fell from the sky, and when it neared ground, there was a forceful bass sound that exploded with power, displacing rain and slowing the dark figure's descent. Tanya walked freely in the downpour. Her will shielded her from the rain. Alder watched in horror. Tanya stepped forward in the shell of a little woman, but with all the gravitas of the destroyer of worlds. Alder watched Tanya saunter her way, having no clue as to how to stop her. She approached and never stopped moving, but slowly raised her hand. Alder felt herself rising to her feet, then into the air. Alder didn't fight the power, because if Tanya knew she had it, she didn't trust that she would best her with some random talent she just learned. She felt invisible hands choking her in the air as deftly as a Sith Lord. Alder focused, but not on Tanya. She looked past her. Alder reached out with her mind until loosening a brick from the shoddy masonry. She felt herself slipping unconscious. Reaching out with her mind, she hurled the brick as fast as her mind would allow it. She instantly dropped to the ground like a marionette with its strings cut when the rock smacked Tanya in the back of the head. She gasped for air, then looked over to Tanya, who didn't appear as if she was getting up, judging from the pooling blood. Michael cried out weakly. Alder crawled over to him quickly. "Is she dead?" he asked, knowing that was the only conceivable way she would have stopped. "I think so," Alder said in a shaky tone. Michael teared up. "I can't move," he said. Alder didn't have words to say. She pulled out her phone. She called for an ambulance and waited for the police to take her away, though she wasn't sure how much of this a cop would believe. "Don't stay. Grab what you can and just go. You shouldn't have to go to jail for her," said Michael while coughing up blood. Alder couldn't argue that logic. She thought about leaving, but the only reason she didn't was the off chance they couldn't find Michael in time. As if he read her mind, Michael said, "Don't worry about me. I don't think I'll make it through anyway. Some of us still have lives to live," he said with a chuckle he choked on, wheezing into a bloody cough. Alder stood. "I love you," she said while kissing Michael's forehead. "I love you too," he said without missing a beat. "Now go." Alder moved to leave, though the idea of leaving him in that condition burrowed a hole in her heart. "You know, the only thing I regret now, after it's all done." Michael paused, even though Alder hadn't planned on saying anything. Michael smiled slyly, at least as much as he could muster in his broken state. "Bet we never fucked." Alder smiled. I really like that story, children. I hope you did too. In the end, it was pretty much the same love as it was back then, 'cause somebody died. Well, children, next time you're looking for love, do it in all the right places, like lonesome dark highways or cemeteries at night, or a funeral might be nice. Any place where it's nice and quiet, where you can get some talking done. Hold your lovers close, children. Good night.